And
That's interesting. That you would come to faith, get confirmed after this long intellectual study.
Yeah.
I would think you'd just be like basking in the sunshine of like Catholic fellowship and the sacraments. How long did that last until you started to drift away?
I guess once I finished, I kind of was like, okay, now I'm there. You know, I've crossed the Tiber. I'm done. You know, I don't need to worry about this anymore.
Were you still attending Holy Mass?
Yeah, very infrequently. It actually
Okay.
became less frequent after
Yeah.
I became confirmed, which was strange.
Yeah.
And then I just drifted off into the world. You know, I started leading a very worldly life. I went into the city of London in finance. I went into investment banking.
Okay.
I went into the hedge fund world. You know, that world is not a spiritual world. You know, I mean, it's a world which is run and operated by
On the love of mammon.
Oh, 100%, you know. And I actually remember my first interview in investment banking. It was quite funny. Like he was a very senior banker who was interviewing me, and he said to me, he was like, so he was American, and he was like, so you studied theology? And I was like, yeah, that's right. He was like, great. Well, from God to mammon. And then I was like, okay. And he was like, you know, back to the real world kind of thing. And he and I actually got on very, very well. But it was just, that interview always stuck with me because
he was right.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was exactly what it was, you know. And I guess that my dad, who had been in finance in the UK, very successful financial career, had almost distinguished his financial career from other people's by being this active Christian in business. And he had like made a hallmark of his life by being a Christian in business. I mean, he went to church very frequently, you know, often 3 times a week. You know, he would lead a Bible study, 2 Bible studies a week, you know, all this. And for him, it was everything. But I kind of thought that, I guess by this point, I was both frightened of exposing myself as a Catholic by this point, which made me more reticent to kind of say anything about it. I just was like, okay, you know what, I'm just done with all of this. And it was almost too exhausting to do it. You know, it's just like, I was too frightened of the reaction, of the ridicule. You know, I didn't have the courage that I should have had. And so I drifted off into the world and, you know, started leading a worldly life, and, you know, all that entailed as a young man in London. And then really it was, you know, kind of what I talked about earlier was this is
the 2-road thing you
exactly.
were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to my first confession, you know, and I was just like, it was just one of those.
So, okay, yeah, first confession in England?
No, this was actually in the States by this point.
Okay.
Right? So
How did that go?
Yeah.
What exactly did you confess?
Honestly, give it to me right now. I mean, it was one of those confessions where, you know, you walk in and it was like, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been X number of years.
Buckle up.
Yeah, since my last confession. And I think the priest, who was an elderly priest on the other side of the confessional, was just...
He kind of took a breath.
Yeah, he was like, sharp inhalation. And actually, I mean, he was, you know, and I said, listen, I don't really know what I'm doing. You know, I mean, I didn't say that exact words, but I said something like that because... I just...
So throughout this time of drifting away from the faith and engaging, you sort of alluded to it by saying the sorts of things a young man in London may fall into. So I'm presuming you're talking about...
relationships.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Out of marriage relationships.
So were you never then tempted to redefine your Christianity to be able to include your fornication?
Oh.
Because that's the coward's way out, it seems to me, but it's the way that seems most convenient.
Oh,
it's like, well, if I
100%.
want to remain Christian and I wish to fornicate and engage in all these things, then I'm not Catholic, or I'm a special type of Catholic, or I'm...
Oh, yeah, 100%.
But you never...
No, I did that the whole time.
Oh, you did do that?
I mean, I totally rewrote Christianity to fit my worldview.
Interesting.
I mean, I
To the point that, did you ever want to kind of stop being Catholic and maybe join the Anglicans?
I mean, I just
Whatever
kind
they
of, I would accept whatever was necessary for me to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
Right. With no intellectual challenging of that. Right. And so I just kind of, I was fully on board with redefining Christianity. And in the back of my head, you know, I mean, it's pathetic now, and I kind of look back on it with such disgust. But, you know, in the back of my head, I was basically saying, well, you know, I was resurrecting the the Protestant argument that like justification by faith alone, and I
Right.
in the back of my head I was like, well, I still believe that Christ was the Son of God, so therefore I'm good enough, right? And that was kind of like, well, that's all I need, you know. So I was kind of back in the ways of my early years, where I was kind of justifying myself through I wasn't attending church, I wasn't attending Holy Mass, you know. I mean, I wasn't going to confession, you know. I would, you know.
Do you want a lighter? I have a lighter over here. Here, Thursday, you want to pass someone? I could. There's, for those who are watching, we have two men behind the cameras. Oh, you come here, just in case. And they're trying to light cigars with unsuccessfully. Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, and actually, that first, and still to this day, I find the Sacrament of Reconciliation to be like one of the. I mean, I would. That was another thing again in my mind, another doctrinal point, because Paul writes about confession, and he says, "Confess your sins to one another."
Mm-hmm.
Like I found that to be hugely powerful, and I still to this day, like, you know, St. Jose Maria talks about this as well, where he talks about like I think he describes it in one of his books that, you know, he like loved confession. I mean, he like bounded into confession with eternal joy, right? Because he wanted to have this reconciliation. And I remember going to this first confession and just feeling this like, I mean, it was overwhelming. I mean, it was just the power of confession is so totemic. It's like it crushes you because you just feel this relief, and I was just like, what am I doing? Like, what have I? And the lights.
It's like you get sobered up.
Yeah.
And you're like, what was I doing?
I mean, like, what have I just done?
Yeah.
Like, what have I done? I have lived a life which the Lord is totally unhappy about, but He still loves me, and His mercy is greater than my worst sin, and His mercy rolls on for generation to generation. And there's a passage in the Psalms. It's like, the steadfast love of the Lord is renewed every morning.
Yes,
you know?
and as far as the east is from the west, so far has He removed our transgressions from us.
That's right. And I just felt
how
like,
good is that? Let's just pause and bask in that for a moment. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah,
Therese of Lisieux, who I'm fond of quoting, and since we just celebrated her feast day, compared the most grievous sins of the most grievous sinner to a drop of water flicked into the raging furnace of God's mercy. I mean, just breathe, everybody who's watching. You know, if